With 3 more months of Valorant experience under my belt, I'm finally ready for some more fire takes that will make you smash your monitors and mass dislike this video when I tell you that Valorant is secretly dying. Okay, well, none of them are that serious to be honest, but I wouldn't be shocked if there wasn't at least one psychopath that would consider doing that. Anyways, my takes last time were kinda ass, so we are here to improve them, yes? Yes! Number 1. Neon is the best duelist in the game. I really don't be seeing enough Neons for my liking in my comp games. I don't know if she's only popular in high elo or not popular at all, but Neon has always seemed underrated to me, and I'm not saying that because she was my first main. Anyways, a duelist's number 1 job is the entry into sight, and Neon's kit is perfectly tailored for this purpose. Her wall creates a perfect path for those to isolate within it from the outside, confusing enemies on your exact whereabouts in the barrier. While taking it all the time can be predictable, you can easily pair it with your stun, which bounces by the way, to mind game your opponents and clear a safe path for the rest of your team. I mean, what other duelist can create a lane into sight? Phoenix might be the closest with his firewall, but it only cuts off 1/2 and isn't nearly as long. Plus, a Neon entering with a Bucky is a straight up hazard for anyone on sight. Number 2, skins for characters are a terrible idea. While I haven't heard it too much, people in the Valorant community have been discussing the possibility of having skins to agents in the game. Most people think this would be a cool concept, considering that games like Overwatch and Fortnite follow this formula of adding skins to characters. However, I think this is not only a terrible idea, but would completely break the game if it got implemented. The reason why other games work with this idea is the fact that you can see the outside of the skins through things like emotes and specific weapons tailored to their characters. Since Valorant doesn't have those, there is literally no point in adding this considering you would only be able to see their hands and just a little bit of their arm. However, depending on how complex the skins are, it would be beyond difficult to recognize and familiarize yourself with characters that only share the abilities. Yes, abilities tell them apart, but if an agent isn't using their abilities, how could you tell? Of course, this all depends on the complexity of these skins, but either way, I feel as though the idea is completely unnecessary. Plus, the fighting in this game over gun skins is enough for me. Number 3, Valorant relies purely on its competitive scene to stay relevant. I probably could have wrote that in a much simpler way, but I don't know, the impact wouldn't have been so, if you know what I'm saying. Anyways, I say this because of the obvious bias Valorant has for its competitive players. Advertisements of competitive events, the addition of Premier, and even skins made for huge Champions game expands on this idea. There technically isn't anything wrong with this, however, without the focus on Valorant's competitive scene, the game wouldn't be nearly as popular as it is now. Most of the time when Valorant peaks over 200,000 concurrent viewers is when a huge esports matches happen to take place. This is simply because the game is formatted into a comp setting. Number 4, Gecko is the best initiator. Coming from a former number 1 Gecko hater makes this kind of awkward, not gonna lie. But I'm a changed woman now. Unless you're on the opposite team, then I hate you. However, I no longer want to murder every Gecko I see in my games, and it's for this reason. What sets Gecko apart from the other initiators, actually everyone in the game for that matter, his abilities are reusable, even his ult. People are quick to forget this until they're attacked by Thrash twice in a row. And don't get me started on how OP his blind is. Yes, you can break it, but for the split second you don't, it will stick on everyone in its sight with no way for the enemies to dodge it. That alone just makes any Gecko player that has more than 2 brain cells infinitely more useful than any other mid-initiator. And lastly, number 5, Valorant is going to die. Okay. Stop the yelling, stop the fighting. Every game dies eventually. But in Valorant's case, it might be a bit earlier than normal. Now, I already spoke about how the competitive scene is heavily focused on by the Valorant dev team. However, I didn't go too in depth about what this could mean for the game's future. While pleasing a competitive audience is applaudable, if you don't put any focus on your main player base, it would leave Stop! While pleasing a competitive audience is applaudable, if you don't put any focus on your main player base, it would leave many people unsatisfied. Most updates are catered to the competitive player base, with few updates applying to things like separate game modes and/or interesting additions to the game. Many creators have already expressed a concern with the game's future, since the direction it is heading isn't friendly for new nor casual players. The problem with this, other than completely undermining most of the player base, is that most competitive players hop from game to game. With every year that passes by, the new games that come out will create new competitive scenes that cause veteran players to move on. Think about what happened to games like Overwatch. This is bound to happen to Valorant eventually, and since it relies on its competitive players to fill the game space, then leaving would cause a rift in the player base that would leave the developers scrambling. It's hard to gain an audience back after losing it, so unless they created some kind of crazy event that would instantly pique everyone's interest, I highly doubt it would ever recover. Anyways, instead of ending on that depressing note, let me show you the reason, specifically, why Gecko stays on top.
One enemy.